Are you looking for an edge, flexible income, and immediate professional respect? Discover the hidden opportunity of becoming a public official with the book, Becoming a Notary by Derek Spruill. This beginner's guide provides the universal roadmap to launch your new career. You will learn the core mission of deterring fraud, the essential tools of the trade, and exactly how to protect yourself while building a respected business. Get your copy of Becoming a Notary on Amazon, and step into a rewarding profession.
Welcome to Notary Knowledge. I am your host, Eddie Montes Travis.
And I am Marylyn Trotter. We are so glad you are tuning in today.
We really are. So picture the most valuable asset you own. For a lot of you out there, that is your home.
Right.
Maybe it's worth $500,000. Maybe it's like $2 million. Now, imagine a criminal trying to legally steal that entire property from you, just transferring the title completely into their name.
It sounds like a movie plot, honestly.
Right. But to pull off a heist of that magnitude, they don't need a team of highly trained hackers. They don't need a vault drill.
No, they really don't.
They essentially need a $10 rubber stamp and a clerk who just isn't paying close enough attention.
It is a terrifying vulnerability when you really look closely at the machinery of our legal system. We tend to think of transferring massive amounts of wealth as this impenetrable process.
Oh, absolutely. We assume there are laser grids and armed guards protecting the paperwork.
Exactly. But the ultimate gatekeeper is often just a person sitting at a desk with an ink pad.
Which brings us to that familiar sound. You know the one. The heavy, satisfying thud of a rubber stamp hitting a stack of paper.
It is a very specific sound.
It really is. You sign a document at the bank, someone glances at your driver's license, stamps the page, and you just move on with your day. It feels like the ultimate mundane administrative chore.
But today, we are going to completely shatter that illusion. We are looking at the surprisingly high-stakes, heavily regulated world of Virginia notaries public.
We really are. We have a solid stack of official sources for you today. We are pulling from the official handbook for Virginia notaries, the Code of Virginia, specifically Title 47.1, and some brilliant expert analyses of the massive legislative changes that are taking effect on July 1st, 2026.
The goal today is to pull back the curtain on that seemingly simple transaction. We are going to explore the surprising legal power notaries actually wield, the strict personal liabilities they carry, and, the massive technological arms race happening behind the scenes to protect your assets.
Because while administrative law might sound a little dry on the surface...
To some people, maybe.
Right, to some people. But this is quite literally the frontline defense of the entire modern economy. Yeah. So let's establish the baseline here. What is a Virginia notary actually doing when they press that stamp onto a piece of paper? Because they are definitely not just verifying that your signature looks pretty.
No, not at all. The Code of Virginia specifies 5 fundamental acts. They take acknowledgments, administer oaths and affirmations, certify affidavits or depositions, perform verifications of fact, and certify true copies of documents.
But there is a major caveat there with the copies, right?
Oh, absolutely. They can never, ever certify vital records. So things like birth certificates, death certificates, or court documents, those are completely off limit.
Right. So at their core, a notary is acting as an unbiased official witness for the Commonwealth.
Unbiased being the key word there. That word is the structural foundation of the entire system. A notary is essentially a human firewall.
I love that phrase, a human firewall.
Yeah, and if there is even a shadow of a conflict of interest, the firewall just collapses. And the potential for fraud skyrockets.
And Virginia is aggressively strict about what actually constitutes a conflict. Obviously, a notary cannot notarize their own signature. That seems obvious enough.
You would hope so.
Yeah, you would hope. But they also cannot notarize their spouse's signature or any document where they or their spouse have a direct beneficial interest.
And the mechanism of enforcement here is fascinating because if a notary violates that conflict of interest rule under Virginia law, they are guilty of official misconduct.
Right.
But the document itself doesn't just instantly vanish into thin air. The notarization actually becomes voidable at the discretion of a court.
Wait, voidable? So a judge has to make that call.
Exactly. So let's say you notarize a property transfer that financially benefits your spouse, and someone discovers it later and challenges the transaction. A judge can completely undo that transfer.
Wow. So the ripple effects of that single bad stamp could unravel millions of dollars in subsequent transactions.
Easily. It is a massive liability.
Virginia also aggressively polices how notaries present themselves to the public, especially with the term notario publico. The state slaps a massive civil penalty on that.
It is huge, up to $500 for a first offense and $1,000 for a second.
Right, if a notary advertises using that term or offers immigration consulting.
Mm-hmm.
But why that specific phrase? Why notario publico?
Well, this is a really vital consumer protection measure built directly into the law. The phrase translates literally to notary public, but culturally and legally, the meanings are just worlds apart.
How so?
So in many Latin American legal systems, a notario is a highly trained, elite legal professional. They operate almost like a specialized attorney who can draft complex legal documents.
Okay, so it's a much higher credential over there.
Right. But in the United States, a notary is a public witness. They are not a lawyer. So predatory actors have historically exploited this linguistic confusion.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they advertise as a notario in immigrant communities to trick non-English speakers into paying these exorbitant fees for unqualified legal advice on really critical immigration matters.
So Virginia penalizes this heavily to prevent the unauthorized practice of law. That is incredibly important to understand.
Absolutely.
You know, the state is also unforgiving from the very beginning of the process, before you even get your stamp. Say you apply to become a notary. You pay your $45 fee to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. You get your approval letter.
Right.
You don't just receive your stamp in the mail, do you? You have to physically go to your local circuit court to take a sworn oath of office.
And you have exactly 60 days to do it. Not 61. 60!
Yeah, the 60-day window is absolute. Bureaucracies usually have a little wiggle room, you know, like a grace period.
Yeah.
But not here.
No grace period at all. The handbook explicitly states that failure to claim the commission within 60 days is not excused for any reason.
Any reason.
None. If your approval notice gets lost in the mail, or you are out of town, or you just flat out forget, the moment day 61 arrives, your commission is completely voided. You just have to restart the entire application process and pay the fee all over again.
That is brutal. But let me push back on something that happens in the corporate world all the time.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say I work for a large real estate firm. My employer tells me they need me to become a notary for the office. The company pays my $45 application fee. They pay the $10 oath fee at the circuit court. They even order and pay for my physical stamp from a vendor.
Very common scenario.
Right. So if I decide to quit my job 6 months later, doesn't the company own that stamp? I mean, they paid for the whole process. Can my boss demand I leave the seal in my desk?
It is probably the most common workplace misconception regarding notaries, and the answer is a definitive no.
Really? Even if they paid for every single thing?
Even if they paid for every single thing. The commission, the physical seal, the electronic seal, and the notary journal are the exclusive property of the notary. Always.
So I just walk out the door with equipment my employer completely paid for? How does that work legally?
Because you hold a public office, you are commissioned by the governor of Virginia, not your boss. You carry the personal legal liability for your official acts.
Oh, I see.
Think about the danger here. If your employer kept your stamp in a desk drawer after you quit, and another employee used it to fraudulently execute documents, state law enforcement agencies are going to knock on your door.
Because my name is on the stamp.
Exactly. You are the commissioned officer. Therefore, Virginia law mandates that the tools of the office remain under the exclusive control of the notary at all times to prevent that exact nightmare scenario.
Okay, but if I have exclusive ownership of the stamp and my boss can't take it back, doesn't that mean my employer has zero legal responsibility if I make a massive mistake or commit fraud while on company time?
That is a great question. Actually, the legal code anticipates that exact dynamic.
So they are liable.
Under Virginia Code, Section 47.1-27, employers can absolutely be held liable for damages proximately caused by their employees' notarial misconduct.
Interesting. But there has to be a limit to that, right?
Yes, there is a specific threshold. The notary had to be acting within the scope of their employment, and the employer had to have actual knowledge of the misconduct, or they reasonably should have known about it.
So a business cannot force a notary to break the rules just to speed up a deal.
Exactly. And they can be sued into oblivion if they turn a blind eye to an employee casually breaking the rules in their office.
This is a perfect time to take a quick pause. We want to remind you to check out our video podcasts, No Notary with Eddie Montes Travis and Marylyn's 90 Seconds of Notary.
And we really encourage you to buy the Notary Knowledge Books by Derek Spruill and visit the Notary Knowledge website. Also, please rate the show, subscribe, and share the podcast with others. It really helps us out.
All right, we are back. So we have this human firewall, armed with a stamp they exclusively own, carrying this immense weight of personal liability.
That's the foundation, yeah.
The primary mechanism they use to actually prevent fraud is identity verification. And usually the rules are incredibly rigid. You need an unexpired, government-issued photo ID, passports, state driver's licenses, military IDs.
Right, the standard forms of identification.
If you don't have those, you can use credible witnesses. Either one witness who personally knows both the notary and the signer, or two witnesses with valid IDs who swear under oath that the signer is who they say they are.
It is a very strict system.
But while reading the Code of Virginia, we found this hidden exception, and it completely changes how you view the law.
Oh, the expired ID exception. It is a brilliant piece of legislative pragmatism. It perfectly balances strict security with deep compassion.
Because if you read the standard Virginia Notary Handbook, which, let's be honest, is the summary document most notaries rely on, it simply states that IDs must be unexpired. Full stop. No exceptions listed.
Which is very misleading.
It is, because if you dig into the actual underlying law, specifically Section 47.1-2 of the Code, it explicitly allows the use of an expired ID up to 5 years expired if the signer resides in an assisted living facility or a nursing home.
You really have to consider the underlying logic of the law here. Why require an unexpired ID in the first place?
Right, to ensure the document is current and valid for fraud prevention.
Exactly. But who in our society is most likely to possess a recently expired driver's license? An elderly, homebound citizen residing in a nursing home. They no longer drive. They cannot physically get to the DMV to renew a piece of plastic they never use.
And these are the exact individuals who desperately need notaries for highly sensitive, time-critical documents. I mean, living wills, advanced medical directives, powers of attorney.
Without this specific exception in the code, a massive portion of our most vulnerable population would just be entirely cut off from executing basic, essential legal documents.
It is amazing how the law bends to accommodate reality there.
It is. But this also exposes a severe training gap. Because the exception is buried in the dense legal code, but completely omitted from the easily readable handbook, a well-meaning notary who only reads the summary might unlawfully refuse vital service to an elderly person in a nursing home.
Just fully believing they're following the rules.
Exactly.
That perfectly illustrates why reading the actual statutes is so critical. You really have to read the source code. So the law adapts for people who are physically confined to an assisted living facility. But how does the law adapt for someone who is entirely out of the state or even out of the country?
Well, this brings us to a massive technological shift. Remote online notarization, or RON.
And Virginia deserves immense credit here.
Yeah.
They were absolute pioneers. They became the first state in the nation to enact remote online notarization back in 2011, with the standards taking effect in 2013.
They really anticipated the borderless nature of the modern digital economy years before anyone else did.
But the geography of how RON works legally is a total brain bender to me. Virginia notaries have statewide jurisdiction, right?
Right.
So if I'm commissioned in Virginia, I can physically travel to Richmond or Roanoke to perform an act. But with RON, let's say I am an electronic notary. I am sitting at my kitchen table in Richmond. The person signing the document is a business executive sitting in a hotel room in Tokyo. Legally speaking, where does that notarization take place?
The legal transaction occurs entirely within the Commonwealth of Virginia.
How is that possible if the signer is literally on the other side of the planet?
Because the network-based digital economy has no physical boundaries. So the law has to anchor the jurisdiction to the physical location of the notary who holds the commission.
Okay, so it's about where the notary is sitting.
Exactly. The electronic notary must be physically located within the borders of Virginia at the exact moment of the act. The signer can be anywhere. And to prove compliance, the electronic notarial certificate attached to the final document has to explicitly state the specific Virginia county or city where the notary was physically sitting during the remote webcam session.
Hold on, though. If the person is in Tokyo, I can't physically hold their driver's license. I can't tilt it to check the hologram or, feel the microprinting. How is this not a massive security vulnerability for the state?
That is the real paradox of remote online notarization. The digital process is actually significantly more secure than a traditional paper notarization.
Wait, really? more secure.
Oh, without a doubt. The threshold for identity assurance is exponentially higher because it relies on strict federal tech standards. You aren't just glancing at a piece of plastic. If the notary doesn't personally know the signer, the system requires multi-factor authentication.
And that starts with credential analysis and biometrics, right? What does credential analysis actually do behind the scenes?
So the signer holds their ID up to the camera, or they upload a high-resolution scan. The software uses these proprietary algorithms to analyze the hidden security features, the font kerning, the barcode data, and it compares it instantly against a global database of valid government templates.
That is wild.
It is. And then it uses biometric facial recognition to match the live video feed of the signer's face directly to the photo on the ID.
And then there is knowledge-based authentication, or KBA.
Yes, KBA is the next layer. Even if a fraudster manages to perfectly forge a physical ID that somehow passes the software scan, they still have to pass KBA.
And how does that work?
This system pulls dynamic data from decades of your credit history and public records. It asks you multiple choice questions that only you should know the answer to under a very strict time limit.
Like asking, which of these 4 obscure counties did you register a vehicle in during 2014?
Exactly. Or, which of these 4 people previously shared your mailing address?
So it is incredibly difficult for an impersonator to fake a physical ID, bypass biometric facial recognition, and simultaneously hack decades of dynamic public records data in real time.
It is near impossible. And furthermore, the electronic notary must apply a valid digital certificate to the final document. Think of a digital certificate like a high-tech wax seal.
Okay, I like that analogy.
If someone tries to change the document after the notarization, even altering a single comma, the digital seal shatters mathematically, and anyone opening the file gets a massive warning that the document was tampered with.
And on top of all that, the entire act is recorded via a live, secure, two-way audio and video feed.
And the law requires the notary to keep that video recording for 5 years.
Which is huge. Compare that to a traditional paper notarization where someone walks into a shipping store, shows an ID, signs, and just walks out. If a legal dispute arises 3 years later, the paper process relies entirely on human memory.
Which we know is incredibly flawed.
Right. But with Ron, investigators have a video recording of the entire interaction, the KBA results, and a tamper-evident digital file.
And because of this heavy technology overhead, the fee structure shifts. A traditional paper notarial act in Virginia is legally capped at $10. But an electronic or remote notarial act is capped at $25.
Because that extra $15 covers the software, the credential analysis, and the massive data storage costs the notary has to maintain for those 5 years.
Exactly.
Okay, but I see the logical loophole here.
Let's hear it.
If Virginia raised the security standards for digital notarizations to such an incredibly high level with biometrics and public records hacking, why would a fraudster ever try to fake an online notarization? Wouldn't they just exploit the traditional paper process?
You've just identified the exact vulnerability that triggered the massive legislative shakeup taking effect on July 1st, 2026.
Okay.
The paper process literally became the path of least resistance for modern criminals.
So let's get into House Bill 163 and Senate Bill 316. Because historically, if you were a traditional paper notary in Virginia, you were not legally required to keep a journal.
Which is wild to think about now.
It is. The Secretary of the Commonwealth highly recommended it as a best practice, sure. But there was no statutory mandate. You could stamp life-altering documents all day and simply walk away without keeping a written record of who appeared before you.
It is a staggering gap in the security infrastructure. And it became a systemic crisis in the form of real estate and deed fraud. A special advisory group established by the Virginia General Assembly actually studied this specific problem. Bad actors realized that stealing a home is sometimes as easy as filing a fraudulent deed at the county courthouse.
Walk us through the mechanics of that, because how does a fake stamp actually steal a house?
So a fraudster targets a property, often one owned by an elderly person or an out-of-state investor. They draft a fake deed transferring ownership of that property to themselves or maybe an LLC they control, but the county clerk won't accept a deed unless it is notarized. So the fraudster simply goes online, orders a physical rubber stamp with the name of a real, commissioned Virginia notary on it, stamps their forged deed, scribbles a fake signature, and files it.
Just like that.
Just like that. Once the deed is recorded, the fraudster takes out a massive cash loan against the stolen property or sells it quickly and just vanishes.
Because before 2026, there was zero point-of-sale friction. Anyone could order a physical stamp from a vendor without proving they were actually the notary listed on the seal.
But that completely changes under the new 2026 legislation. Starting July 1st, notaries will be required to present official proof of their commission, the actual document issued by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, just to purchase a physical seal.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, vendors are required to verify it, and both the vendor and the notary must retain that proof of purchase for 5 years. Virginia is essentially treating the physical notary seal like a controlled item to cut off the supply of counterfeit stamps.
That is a massive shift. But the new law goes even further with the journal mandate, right?
It really does.
Starting in 2026, keeping a chronological written journal for all paper-based, non-electronic notarial acts becomes strictly mandatory. And those journals must be retained for at least 5 years from the date of the transaction.
And the law is very specific about what goes in there.
Yeah, it specifies exactly what needs to be logged: the date, the time, the type of act, a description of the document, the printed name and address of the signer, the exact method used to identify them, and the fee charged. How does this specifically stop the dead ends investigators were hitting?
Well, let's say law enforcement is investigating a suspected case of deed fraud. They pull the forged deed, and they see your real notary stamp and name on it. They knock on your door.
Okay.
Before 2026, you could just say, I didn't stamp that, and since I am not required to keep a journal, I have no records of what I did that month. The investigator hits a brick wall. They cannot legally prove whether you were negligent, complicit, or just an innocent victim of a counterfeit stamp.
The paper trail was completely severed.
Exactly. But under the new 2026 laws, if your stamp is on a fraudulent document, investigators will demand your mandatory 5-year journal.
Right.
If there is no entry for that transaction, and you have a pristine chronological log of every other act you performed, it strongly points to the fact that someone counterfeited your stamp and impersonated you.
So it protects the innocent notary.
It protects the notary, and it gives law enforcement the actionable paper trail they actually need to prosecute the real fraudster. It is a necessary evolution. Virginia locked down the digital frontier back in 2013, and now they are circling back to secure the ancient paper trail.
It fundamentally changes how you view this profession.
Yeah.
We started this talking about the mundane thud of a rubber stamp in an office. But when you look at the complex reality, the strict personal liability, the dynamics of employer responsibility, the deep compassion of the expired ID exception for nursing home residents,
And the mind-bending ability to anchor international digital transactions to a kitchen table in Richmond.
exactly, and this aggressive new front in the war against real estate fraud, you realize the immense weight behind that simple stamp.
The notary public really is the foundational layer of trust in our legal and economic systems. Without that unbiased human witness, the entire machinery of modern commerce would just grind to a halt. We simply couldn't trust the documents that govern our lives.
Which leaves you with a profound philosophical question to consider as we look toward the future. We are currently entering an era where artificial intelligence can clone a human voice perfectly in 3 seconds.
This is scary stuff.
Deepfakes can seamlessly alter a live video feed. Reality itself is becoming increasingly difficult to verify through a screen. If a $10 fee and a quick conversation can validate the transfer of $1 million estate, the human firewall is more critical now than at any point in history.
I completely agree.
As technology makes it easier to counterfeit everything else in our world, will the simple, ancient act of a human being looking someone in the eye, whether across a desk or through a highly secure biometric webcam, become the only form of truth we can actually rely on?
The tools of commerce are constantly evolving, but the fundamental need for human accountability remains exactly the same.
So the next time you hear that heavy thud of a rubber stamp hitting a stack of paper, remember the complexity behind it. You aren't just listening to paperwork being filed. You are listening to the firewall holding strong.
Well said. And remember, you can email your questions to Derek@dereksproul.com. We will try to answer as soon as possible at the end of our shows.
Special thanks to our team. Executive producer Derek Sproul, lead writer Marylyn Lee Trotter, graphics by Eddie Montes Travis, music by Thomas Bynum. Produced by Magnificent Works Business Solutions. Don't just be listeners of the knowledge, be doers of the knowledge. This is Notary Knowledge. Until next time.
Are you an aspiring notary looking to join millions of other notaries? Start your journey with the Notary Public Foundation by Derek Sproul. This essential guide provides the step-by-step process to becoming commissioned in your state. Don't stumble into the role. Walk into it with confidence. Grab your copy of The Notary Public Foundation by Derek Spruill on Amazon today.